Good day and welcome to the Lilly Roddy Show, coming to you from the LRS studios here in Houston, Texas. I'm always so glad to have you join me each week so I can share my astrological point of view with you. As most of you know, we've really been getting the rain here in Texas, and now of course it's spreading over the rest of the USA from Tropical Storm Bill. I hope everyone is safe as they can be, and really my heart goes out to those who lost friends and family and their homes in this terrifying flood, because flooding is a horrible experience to go through. I can attest to that. Well, with Mercury officially direct this week, I am changing the format of my show. I'm going to still have my daily astrological forecast available on my websites, but I'm going to get back to talking about current events and how the planets affect those parts of our lives. I'm going to comment more on current weather patterns, the upcoming elections, the candidates' charts, the progress of the new civil rights, and how that relates to Houston's chart and the USA chart. I'll also speak more on the economy once again, including the Dow Jones charts and probably some other large charts like the charts they use for the specific boards in England and in Holland, India, all those places. So I'm going to sort of expand my economic look to a little bit broader point of view. But you can still get my daily forecast on Lillyroddyshow.com or find us on Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. And please make sure you connect with my Lilly Roddy Show page and not necessarily Lilly Roddy, otherwise you'll get my more personal stuff, not that you can't be involved in that. But that has a different tone to it than my Lilly Roddy Show site. So if you want to get in contact with me, you can always reach me at lillyroddyshow@aol.com, and if you want to get in touch with me directly. So let's talk about what's coming up this week and how the planets are affecting us. This week we do have one fairly long void moon period this month. That occurs on Wednesday evening in the 25th through the middle of the day on Thursday the 26th. So it starts in the evening of the 25th through about half the day on Thursday. So you might want to make sure that on those particular days, you're operating either before or after the void moon goes. On Sunday, the 21st, it's summer, the official first day of summer, the summer solstice. And of course, summer is named for the famous area of Sumer, and one of the oldest cities on the planet, Ur. You are such an interesting place to study about. Anyway, the first official day of summer here in Houston will be on the 21st at 11:38 a.m. This is when the sun enters the sign of Cancer for the next 30 days. On this day, the solstice, we have the longest day. And solstice means sun standing still. We have the summer solstice and the winter solstice. At the winter solstice, we have the longest night. The equinoxes, which are in spring and fall, and those days have the same number of daylight and nighttime hours. As the sun enters Cancer, she'll eventually be making contact with the ongoing Uranus-Pluto square, but that really won't happen until the second and third week of July. Mars also enters Cancer on the 24th of this month, and he will have some very strong contact with that same Uranus-Pluto square. This will be happening later on from the middle of July forward, so there's a lot of extra intense energy coming up. And I just want to sort of talk about the middle of July. July 15th is a big day with both Mercury and Mars opposing Pluto in the sky. Now, one of the reasons that I find this so interesting is that this is the day the NASA satellite, New Horizons, will be taking the very first pictures of Pluto up close. There it is, right in the language of the stars, our date and time for our meeting with Pluto. I just find that so interesting. So I'll, of course, talk more about that as we get closer to July 15th. But overall, we're looking for the general energies to get more intense from the beginning of this week, June 21st, forward. I was trying to remember what day I was in. Now, over the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've had a big encounter with Mercury retrograde, and especially with Mercury interacting with Neptune. Now, when we have Neptune contacting the other planets, it's not unusual to see big storms. I've seen a lot of this, especially during the winter times. Now, the Mercury retrograde, and what made this particular Mercury retrograde so much more difficult than usual? Well, first, as Mercury goes through its direct movement, when it did that, it will make contact with Neptune 3 times. Now, we've already had it make contact twice with Neptune. One was on May 9th. The next one was on May 29th. And then the last one will be on this Tuesday, June 23rd, when Mercury squares Neptune for the last time. Now, why is this difficult when these two planets connect? First, Mercury is the planet that symbolizes logical choices. It favors the intellect, whereas Neptune is the planet that symbolizes hope and faith, and it favors the heart. So when these two planets combine, we can get all sort of mixed messages. But the actual confusing side of it with Neptune is that all the messages can be true at the same time. And as we all know, that adds a lot of confusion. And with all strong contacts with Neptune, we are more likely to be psychologically sensitive. This tends to keep people in a more passive or retreat-oriented time. And for some, it can really trigger their depression. So really, we've had a lot of strong contact with Neptune over the last, really, month. It's been a little bit longer than that, but for sure a whole month. And because of that, that has sort of made us feel kind of flat, low energy, or just that we want to be away from places where we don't feel comfortable. And often that can be in crowded situations or in places where we don't feel very much in control. Sometimes Neptune, if you have a very strong Neptune in your natal chart, sometimes Neptune is associated with agoraphobia, which is sort of the fear of open spaces. If you have a strong Uranus, you're going to be have more fear associated with small, trapped places, in case you want to know where your phobias come from. Now, because of the strong contact with Neptune, it tends to flatten the energy out, and we just don't feel as active, nor should we. I mean, and that's really the message there. And you may not remember this, but we did have a lot of strong planetary contact with Neptune in December of 2014, right before Christmas. Because if you'll remember, Christmas seemed very flat, very low energy. Not that people didn't enjoy the time that they spent together, but it was just not as energetic a time as we make it. Now, we'll probably continue to have these same sort of patterns of the planets making contact with Neptune, as generally speaking, as the planets move through the mutable signs. More recently, of course, the Sun, Mars, Mercury, and Venus had been moving through Gemini, a mutable sign. Our next big mutable sign that the planets will move into, that will be Virgo, and that'll be in the latter part of August. and in September. So that'll be a time where we'll see a lot of the same kind of psychic energies, where our psychic energies are increased, or we just don't feel like we want to have to interact with so many people, or really deal with a lot of our sort of day-to-day habit and chores that we normally do. So technically, Mercury is direct, but we will still feel the drag of the retrograde until after June 23rd, when it makes its last square to Neptune in this particular Mercury retrograde cycle. So don't be surprised if it still feels like you're trying to walk through molasses. That should lighten up after the 23rd. And personally, I'm sort of waiting for after the 23rd so that I can purchase a new computer. Now, and back up to the storm data. Here in Houston, our biggest days of rain were on May 25th, and that's when Mars squared Neptune on Memorial Day. And it was a big rain event here in Houston. Now, that was the day when Mars was exactly squaring Neptune in the sky. The other major rain event for Houston was May 31st, and the Sun squared Neptune. So personally, I'm exercising some caution on June 23rd, as we might get some more rain here in this area. So I kind of expect the atmosphere and the environment to remain thick and, potentially very rainy. And even if those storms don't necessarily impact Houston, they will impact other places, as they are right now in Oklahoma and in North Texas and moving on. So I would say be careful out there, and be careful especially on June 23rd. Also this week, Mars enters Cancer on June 24th, following the Sun. Now, this should have a strong impact on the USA chart. Since the USA is a Cancer country, July 4th, 1776, Lady Liberty, give us you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry. So, as Mars moves through Cancer, it's actually going to intensify the USA's chart. Now, also at this time, Mars is currently out of bounds. So his energies of impatience and challenges are especially strong right now, and will probably continue all the way through July. When Mars enters Cancer, the USA is much more on the defensive as well as the offensive. We have more tense relationship with other countries, even the ones that profess to be our friends. The USA has Mars in Gemini in our natal chart, and during our Mars return, the end of May and the beginning of June, our government, internet, and cyber systems were attacked. So there was a clear example of a Mars return aspect that takes place in the USA chart about every 2 years. And Gemini, that's the sign our Mars is in Gemini, rules information, and Mars indicates the attack. Usually people that have Mars in Gemini tend to attack more verbally rather than physically. Doesn't mean that they won't, but usually there's a lot of verbiage back and forth. And we have that in the USA chart, Mars in Gemini. It is in our 7th house of relationships, and that's why we have such Martian relationships with other countries. Either they're our allies or they're our enemies. Does that sound very Gemini to you? So that's just what we have. Now, so we do need to pay more attention to Mars, especially in mid-July. I'm sure I'll have a lot more to say about that as we get closer. Now, Saturn has slipped back into Scorpio. This will help us to get our resources and debts in order. Trust and loyalty in relationships will be needed as Saturn asks the hard questions moving through Scorpio. Saturn will move back into Sagittarius on September the 17th. This Saturn retrograde should help with the price of oil to get it up. The prices originally fell when Saturn moved into Sag and began a close square to Neptune, the ruler of gas and oil. The last pass of Saturn to Neptune is November 26th of this year. After that point, we will eventually see the price of gasoline go up and not keep at sort of this steady level. It still may go down a little bit more as we get into October, November, but eventually it'll start to move up. That'll be the last pass of Saturn-Neptune. Also, in that same vein, I just thought I'd comment on this because this is so much in the news lately. Saturn in Sagittarius is really part of the examination of our legal system. And initially what we're seeing is, of course, there's a lot of the sort of the police, their reactions to people of diversity and how they react and what they do. And because of the amount of cameras, then we're seeing a much more real version of what's going on. So Saturn in Sagittarius, besides doing a multitude of things, would necessarily make us pay more attention to our legal systems. Now, the fact that Neptune is in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, in a sense, really champions the underdog. And with Saturn squaring that Neptune, what's happening is we're getting concrete proof of how badly some of the more underdogs in our country are being treated. And of course we know what that means. Those are people that are economically or sociologically oppressed. Now, because of that, this aspect of paying much more attention to the law, the legal systems, all of that is actually going to get stronger as Saturn moves through Sagittarius, even after it passes the square to Neptune. So I won't be surprised that we won't have different laws and particularly ways to protect the individual from the legal oppression and the legal righteousness that Sagittarius often shows. And so with Saturn in Sag, we're beginning to see where the holes are in our justice system and how badly it is and how much it doesn't represent really the heart and the core of what America stands for. So I expect to see a lot more of that as we go on. Well, listen, that's all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed my new revised format, Lilly Roddy Show version 3.0. Remember, you can still find my daily astrology at Lillyroddyshow.com, and I'll post those always on my YouTube channel there in the information section. So thank you, and please join me next week as we look at June 28th through July 4th, 2015. This is the Lilly Roddy Show coming to you from the LRS studios here in Houston, Texas, reminding you to keep those stars in your eyes. Bye-bye.